Today marks 3 years since Russia launched its invasion of Ukraine, and President Trump is saying he can end this war, but he's making some big demands of Ukraine to do it, which he recently blamed for starting the conflict. Lieutenant General H.R. McMaster served as Trump's national security advisor during his first administration, and he's now a CBS News contributor. He's also the author of At War with Ourselves, My Tour of Duty in the Trump White House. General McMaster, thank you very much for being here.
Hey, Tony, great to be with you guys.
You know, Republicans have been shocked by things the president has said the last week about Ukraine and Russia. The national security community has been shocked. Europe's been shocked. What do you make of it?
Yeah, everybody should be shocked because what the president has done is reframe the war in a way that's just not true. And I think it's evidence that Vladimir Putin is playing him. He had this long phone conversation with Putin. And it also struck me that, the national security advisor, the Secretary of State, they were overseas before the president made these statements. So Putin plays Trump with, the prospects of a big deal, that he could be the peacemaker. He gives him his warped version of history. And so that's what you heard from Donald Trump. Those were all the Kremlin's talking points that you heard him roll out.
You think they must be celebrating at the Kremlin right now? You write a lot in your book about how President Putin seems to take great joy and pride in manipulating Donald Trump. Elaborate a little bit on what you mean by that. And now there are plans underway for a face-to-face meeting between the two. What do you think about that?
Yes. So, the Kremlin studied Trump very closely. They're trying to use, like they would with any president, his own character, personality against him. And so, he can't go wrong with flattery with President Trump. So you hear Putin always praising President Trump. But then he also criticizes the other people, the stupid people before President Trump who created all of the problems, right? So he blames Americans, like previous administrations, rather than, Putin's own acts of aggression. And then he holds out the prospect of a big deal. Hey, President Trump, you can bring peace. But, this would be a false peace based on appeasement. So whereas Trump would like maybe to get the Nobel Peace Prize, I mean, he might get the Neville Chamberlain Award, which, because of appeasement of
Does
Putin.
Putin want peace, do you think?
No, Putin wants to dominate Ukraine, and he's wanted to dominate Ukraine since he came into office. And so this is what's really important, Gayle, is to look at the pattern of Russian aggression since he came in 25 years ago, right? And so you had a whole range of actions against Europe, and even what's going on in Ukraine is matched by a shadow war across Europe, cutting undersea cables, burning warehouses, incendiary bombs on aircraft.
Wow.
And Putin he's already annexed Belarus. He's turned an election in Romania, you could say in Slovakia. He's subverting Georgia, Moldova. He's not going to stop until he is stopped. So, President Trump says, hey, peace through strength. How about some of that? Because Putin is actually in a really weak position. Putin is in the position that Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei was in 2015. President Obama got him up off the mat with the Iran nuclear deal. Trump is doing the same thing for Putin, except even worse, is he's blaming the Ukraine war on the Ukrainians. So what I would say is, how about a little bit more peace through strength and less of the false peace through appeasement?
So how does NATO factor into all of this, given the concessions the United States is prepared to make with Russia? Can NATO go at it alone without the United States?
Yes, if the Europeans have the will. Yes. So this is something Trump is right on, is the burden sharing from NATO allies. And so if Europe steps up, they can do it. If you take the defense budgets of the NATO countries and you subtract the United States, it's still enough to deal with Russia. So there's a heck of a lot more that our European friends can do. But the way the message is delivered, it cuts against really that agenda. So don't blame the Europeans for what's happening. Really recognize that they are sharing the burden, but say, you got to do more. That's an okay message. But the way the vice president went to the Munich Security Conference, for example, lecturing them, that's not kind of the way to win friends. You can be tough, but you should be respectful with them.
Let's talk about the firing of C.Q. Brown. You know what it's like to be a general, to be fired by Donald Trump.
Absolutely.
So what do you make of that? Because, C.Q. Brown was a man, they say, of high integrity, four-star general, being replaced by someone who doesn't have the ranking that he does.
Right.
What did you make of that firing? And of Admiral Franchetti as well?
Yeah, well, I think it's regrettable because of kind of the narrative around it, especially, that these
That they
people
were
weren't
DEI
qualified.
hires,
They were
yes.
utterly qualified for their jobs. Now, are these the best people in President Trump's view to advance his agenda? If he thinks no, that's okay. That's his prerogative to replace them. But these are true professionals. What you're going to see with CQ Brown is that it is living in him, as an example, the professionalism of our military. What really causes great concern for me is the tendency among both political parties at times to drag the military into the partisan politics that's tearing our country apart, tearing even some families apart, right? That's destructive for our military. Our military must be seen as above all that. CQ Brown is above all that. He's a true professional.
But now, isn't it in fact politicized?
Yes, there's this misunderstanding, right, that, generals or admirals are woke, or that they were advancing President Biden's, agenda. They were actually doing what was expected of them by their civilian leadership. Generals and admirals don't make policy, right? Civilian leaders do. So if you don't like the policies in the Defense Department, vote somebody else in. That's what happened. What I'm concerned about, and I believe that there's a lot that needed to be changed from the Biden administration in terms of priorities of the Defense Department. The so-called, radical DEI agenda, or, these various postmodernist theories that they were advancing, and maybe not enough emphasis on, hey, fighting and winning wars, being prepared to do that. That's okay. But what I'm afraid of is the cure that they're administering might be worse than the disease itself and further politicize the military, or try to anyway. Our military will not fall for it.
You're going to stick around.
I hope you're right.
Yeah, General McMaster is sticking around. Thank you very much. You're going to be on CBS Mornings. Plus, we're going to talk about what China is making of all of this, what's happening in Ukraine.